This podcast is sponsored by Tusk, an open source non-ICO crypto project powered by community. Check them out on the web at tusk.network. That's TUSC.network. The Rob McNeely program is the nexus of cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, and entrepreneurship. Now, welcome to the program. Today I'm talking to Dirk Luth. He is with Upland, which is this really interesting new blockchain property development game, virtual property development. And I just want to talk a little bit about what they're doing. So welcome to the show. How are you today, Dirk?
Yeah, hi, Rob. Thank you for having me here today. I'm really excited, speaking on your podcast.
Well, I appreciate you having me. It says are you calling me today from Germany or from San Francisco?
No, actually from San Francisco Bay Area, to be precise, from Mountain View, which is a little bit on the peninsula.
Wonderful. What part but you are originally from Germany. What part of Germany are you from originally?
I am, I always lived in two cities in Germany, which was Frankfurt and Hamburg. Lots of people know Frankfurt because everybody passes through the airport there, but otherwise it's a beautiful city as well.
Well, that's very cool. What brought you to the United States?
Well, the thing is, I'm what you call an entrepreneur. I started two companies in Germany, and back in 2008, 2009, I said, well, what's the next thing I can do? Start another company. But in Europe, things are different, obviously, than in Silicon Valley. I'd been in Silicon Valley before, and I think the real big ideas are developed in Silicon Valley and not in Europe so much, at least at that time. And that drove me, saying, you know what, I'm going to take, pack my bags, take my family, completely own risk, and move to Silicon Valley back in 2009.
This is my own observations because I spent, a little bit of time in Europe myself, that Europeans don't tend to be as entrepreneurially focused as I think Americans are. In fact, sometimes that I've spent in different countries in Europe, actually entrepreneurs were kind of in many places looked down upon. What's been your experience with that, culturally speaking?
Yeah, actually, that is one of the reasons actually I came here, especially to the US and especially to Silicon Valley, because that's exactly, you're right with that notion. I mean, we, taking Germany and Europe as a whole, of course, it has a history, and especially in Germany, we have a lot of people in what is called so-called the Mittelstand, which is mid-sized, small, medium enterprises, which is somehow the backbone of the German economy. But the reason I came also to the US for me was because they're more related to, let's say, very much engineering, but the big things, there was a lack of, let's say, vision for lots of people to really do something or to go. Vision is one part of it, but the other part is also the whole idea of taking more risks. And that's what is lacking currently to my mind. It's got better, but that's what is missing. Taking risks as an entrepreneur, you don't have that much. And it's all the whole society in Europe is a little bit more leans towards security, job security, and so on. So you see that. So for example, one example was there was a survey in the where they asked students, what do you want to become when you graduate from school? And over 50% of the people said actually, we want to become some kind of a civil servant, work in the administration because it's job security and less, becoming an entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's interesting. I always thought that German culture has always been really, interesting. I mean, I come from a German-Polish background primarily, and so my father spoke German, Polish, and English as a child. He was trilingual because of my grandparents and great-grandparents some of them were they were immigrants from Europe. And it's interesting what I see that it's just there's like really big risk aversion with a lot of Europeans. They're just really, they're very concrete. They like things very spelled out. They like a lot of details, but you're right. I think that, the visionary piece, I think is not I don't know. I don't know if it's culturally pushed down or if it's just something about that is just they focus on the concrete. You know, I always joke around, if you want to look at some kind of product manual, right? Look at the German instructions in German and versus the English version, right? It's about like, yeah, a tenth the thickness. And I worked for, when I was younger, I worked for several, you know, big corporations that had, places and outlets in Germany. And so, and it's funny because I work with a lot of German engineers and Swiss engineers, and you would always have this discussion about Americans don't read the manual, so don't bother building one for them, whereas Germans, it was this joke that if you had a product, the Germans would argue about a comma on page 34 that it shouldn't have been in that one thing, and they'd be going and looking over, all these little details. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting, but I always like to see the background of what
no, I can completely agree to that point. So if you look at the German culture, right, we had a famous German philosopher, his name is Schopenhauer, and he always said there was 3 steps to truth, or 3 stages to truth. He said the first stage is, and honestly, you find that also somewhere maybe more towards the east in the US, but it's much more heavy, in Europe. So the first step was always, when you have an idea, it's ridiculed, right? Everybody laughs at you. Oh, we never did something, like there's really, that's a stupid idea. And, I remember very well when, in 2005, 6, when I was really excited, I think was the time, it was a little bit later, I think, when Twitter came around, right, or 2007. I said, oh, what a great new way of, transporting media or ideas to other people. People said, what am I going to tweet about? Right? That I'm going to the restroom now, or what is the story? Right? People were really laughing at it. And then when it became more popular, right? People were starting to opposing it, right? Well, you never have done these kind of things over here in general, right? It's the second step actually, or no, we don't do this. That's not good. And then the third, eventually, when something's really successful, and that's what Schopenhauer says, is, now it's become self-evident. I always said so, right? I always knew, you should have listened to me 2 years ago when I told you this is going to be a hit. And these are the 3 steps, really cool, then opposing, and then self-evidence. That's what's very much in let's say in the culture which is there. And when I compared especially to the US, what I found when I came over here, I think Americans are much more short-term oriented, much more, I'd say, child is maybe not the right word, but they like to take toys and to play around with it, and if they don't like it, they dispose it, right? And the Europeans are much more for the long term. They really think about, should I really use this toy, stick into this metaphor, and continue working with it. And then after a while, then they say, okay, maybe you do try to do and risk and maybe start playing with it. But that's also somehow which is different. I mean, you look at the entrepreneurs I have a lot of entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs in Europe and also in Germany. What I like so much in Silicon Valley or in the US is that people are always giving back. So they had maybe a successful exit, and then they do angel investments and help lots of entrepreneurs, to come off the ground, what you obviously need when you start a new company. I saw a lot of my friend entrepreneurs in Germany. Some of them invested into startups, and I have my current startup, also a good friend of mine invested into that startup. But lots of people then went again to the security, i.e. they invested to real estate, right? Kind of interesting. That's where somehow the mentality sits also even with the entrepreneurs.
I think it's always good to see the cultural differences across the board, just because you can compare and contrast. And I think when it comes to organizational building, when you're building a team, there are certain attributes of different cultures you want on a team. I think, for instance, I always think back to my days when I was in business school, right, is that you definitely I like having Germans and that kind of German work ethic, that detail oriented. I want that guy in charge of operations because he's detail oriented. I want him to be the project manager. For instance, and some of these are stereotypes, of course, but, we always like to say, you know what, Italians and French, they tend to be a little more liberal with time and deadlines and things of that nature. They're a little more indefinite, right? That's just culturally how they are. If you've spent time in those places, they're different, very different than Germany. And you might want to put those guys in charge of communications or sales, for instance. But the vision thing, put the Yank in charge of that, kind of like.
No, absolutely. So we always say, Germans, I mean, don't get it wrong. I think Germans is great in engineering, and, that's what their foundation is based upon, right? But when it comes to sales and marketing, I think Americans are just better. However, it's changing, right? And blockchain is also a very interesting new development, what I currently see. We'll probably touch that a little bit later in this podcast. But I think it's really where I would say, hey, if you have a great engineering team, leave it in Germany, because they do very, very, very good quality work. But if it comes to sales and marketing, try to adopt the American way of doing things, trying to identify user personas, target groups, and so on. That's what Americans just do par excellence.
What I've found with blockchain and crypto over the last couple of years that I've been kind of in this space is that you are dealing with a very international market out of the gate. It's global. It's just global, and there's not a lot of barriers that you're having to deal with. So it's like now you're interfacing with all these different cultures, and given the amount of the Asian influence is tremendous in blockchain right now. They're a huge part of the space, and it's interesting, having to kind of interface with all those different pieces 24/7. It's been interesting, at least also being inside a project and kind of having to deal with all the different personalities and communication styles and multilingual groups. It's like, wow, it's been interesting. Because crypto's international, it's global from day one, so it's been pretty interesting. So tell me about what you're doing. Tell me about Upland.
Yeah, so Upland is you said it also when you introduced yourself, is basically, it's a virtual property game. So the idea is that you buy and sell and can trade virtual properties, which are real estate properties, which are based on real world addresses. So when you live on 234 Post Street in the future, you will be able to buy that property. The way it works in the app is basically you use, when you sign up, and we're currently in closed beta, but soon we'll go open beta also. But the idea is you get a map application, you zoom in, you can buy a property, and once you bought it, you are able to sell it at a later stage. The way you buy it is actually, and that's something we do a little bit different than lots of others. First of all, you need now to buy UPEX, which is our in-game cryptocurrency. And you can buy those UPEX with either with credit card, or also we're accepting also PayPal. So right now we're not yet accepting crypto. And the reason why we're doing this, because we always said from day one, we want to build a mass market applications. And as we know, crypto or blockchain is a market of roughly, what I heard, roughly 50 million people worldwide, but gamers are 2 to 3 billion on the globe. So the idea is we really want to get everyone on board, and they should not deal with complicated wallets or private key handling. So this is still a huge barriers of entry. So we put a lot of thoughts into this whole onboarding process, how to make it simple, and then how to purchase something. So that's what the mission of the company is, that we really want to make this game accessible for mass audiences.
So is the long-term goal that the in-game currency will be able to be traded in the real world on exchanges?
Yes, that is the goal. However, we want to have to comply with regulatory environment, especially in the US. So maybe also explain a little bit one more step how it's going to work. So you exchange UPEX, which is our UPX, which is our in-game currency. You buy that with fiat currency, and then you purchase a property. So then you own this property. Once you own this property, you will start earning additional UPEX or yield on this property, which makes it interesting, because then you can take those UPEX potentially and buy other properties for that. And we're gamifying the whole approach. So the next step is then that you can start and complete a collection. That means, for example, collect 3 bars in San Francisco. Once you collected 3 bars in San Francisco, or three properties on Mission Street, so different levels and different scarcity also on those collections, then you start earning actually accelerated Apex on them. That means you get a one-time boost, and then also on top you will get a recurrent higher earning on those properties. What makes it now interesting is that you can go and sell those properties because they are all non-fungible tokens. We're talking blockchain here. You own them, and you can go and sell them, those properties on the marketplace again. So when you maybe have some properties you don't need for collection, you can sell them. You can sell them either for Apex, you can trade them against another property, and soon you will be able to sell them for fiat. So we were going to be the first, or one of the first, allowing fiat out also again. So that's hopefully coming in the first quarter of next year.
So what other kind of gamification elements do you plan to build into this kind of game?
Yeah, so after the collections, we are going to have, so the idea is everything is location based. You will also get some kind of what we call a block explorer, which is some kind of an avatar which roams the city, right? And this helps you to discover other properties. So when it roams the city, you will be able to, each time he touches a property, you will be able to buy that property. Because the only way to buy properties going forward will only be through the marketplace or through where your avatar or the block explorer has touched some of those properties. Going forward, we will, since it's very much location-based driven, we will add other location-based features. That means you can take your mobile phone, and when you're actually in the city, you will be able to find maybe something on the streets, which could be a piece of a property, which could be also, which could also be Apex, which we're going to gamify in terms of treasure hunts. So that's something we are planning on doing also in the first quarter of next year to introduce.
So I would love to talk about the long-term roadmap, because I got all sorts of ideas on how that could be used for different things, as well as an entrepreneur, because I'm always trying to think of a different angle. But it's interesting. I think right off the bat, there's going to be a lot of domain squatters trying to squat on certain types of, properties like national parks, for instance, or monuments and things like that. Is that something that you anticipate, or is that something that you think is something that will be a bad thing? Or what would be your take on that? Do you think that's what people are going to be doing?
So yeah, I mean that's what you've seen also in other type of games, that people are looking for those landmarks. Currently, you're not able to buy yet landmarks in Upland. We did that on purpose because we foresee a different way to purchase those, and it's probably not that only one person can buy it, but we rather see a group of people buying it together. So there's some of these kind of features will be coming up soon. And then, of course, the ones who are first, they can get it and they can do other things with it. But that is just the pure, let's say, parcel or the plot of the landmark. But you ask, what the vision is and where it's all going, because you can eventually see. Right now, we gamify, let's say, the distribution of all the land around the world. We're starting out San Francisco, then we'll go out, branch out to other cities in the US, and eventually we go global also soon. Not soon, but in the next year. But once people own just the land, and when you have to think about it, since we are blockchain, it's non-fungible tokens, that means everything circles around true ownership. So our marketing message is also join the ownership revolution, which is something really new. Just imagine when you live somewhere in the city, like in London or somewhere in Asia, sometimes it's not affordable for you to buy any property again. So what we need, ownership revolution means for us is that the first time, people can go and buy property. And when you look at the vision, eventually, once we start, we have a good distribution, we will allow that people will start building on those properties, erect some kind of structures, right? They can represent something what is there in the real world, but maybe there's something else. So you will, and then you can add completely other layers, use other technologies, and just AR, augmented reality, virtual reality, all these things we have in mind, which are a little bit more for the longer term roadmap. But eventually, right now, we're distributing the land, and eventually, sometime next year, we'll also start allowing people to build on top of the land.
So the question I would have is, how is the price determined for a property right now? So it sounds like you guys, as the game developers, you guys own all the property right now. What would it cost, for instance, in real fiat to buy my house?
So I don't know exactly where you live, and you live in Salt Lake City, right?
Yeah.
You call me correct, yeah. So right now we have San Francisco. Obviously, it's what we want to do is always that it's somehow connected to real life. As we probably have heard, San Francisco is not the cheapest area to live in these days, so you can imagine that's a little bit more expensive than other areas.
I would assume.
Yeah, so I don't know how big your parcel is or your plot of your house, but I assume your house would probably cost something between $5 and $10, right? That's my assumption, and unless you live on a huge acre, and because it depends always on the number of what we call up squares. So just to be quickly a little bit technically, so we divided the world into 3 meters by 3 meters, which is 1 square, and we call those up squares. So in order to represent a property better, and when you take, let's say, your property might consist of 100 up squares, right? In order to show your property on the map. And each up square has a certain price to it. So to your earlier question, how did we come up with the pricing? So we actually looked in San Francisco, different neighborhoods and have different pricing. You can look those prices up in other platforms like Zillow, the real life prices, Trulia, and so on. Yeah, so you can do that. So what we basically said, okay, we take the cheapest property or the cheapest neighborhood in San Francisco. We took that. And we said property should cost around $2 to $5. And then we extrapolated the cost for other properties. However, we had to do some adjustments. But you have to have in mind, this is only the way we are selling the properties right now. In the long run or the midterm, also prices will be determined by the market. And the market can be like the real life market. However, as we have those collections, there could be a reason that people, are really keen to get certain properties in certain areas to complete a collection. So the market prices can, but don't have to deviate from real market prices.
So my undergrad major was geographic information systems and cartography. So I really like mapping, even though it's been a while since I did anything with it. So what kind of underlying tech, where are you getting your maps from and all your geodata? It's just kind of a nerdy question.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So we're currently working with a provider. It's called Mapbox. So they based themselves based on OpenStreetMaps. But the biggest challenge is they do not have the property borders, right? They might have addresses, but they don't know exactly how the property borders are. And there we are working with another provider who has the parcels all around the US. It's a provider called LandGrid. So that's where we're getting also those parcels. However, on the global scale, it's going to be a little bit more tricky. First of all, one of the reasons is cost. So if you buy property borders in some countries, in some cities, it's very expensive. But other cities, I think like Singapore or Berlin in Germany, they actually provide the data for free even. Yeah. So it always depends a little bit where you are. But there's going to be areas in the world, and as you can imagine, we're going to offer the upland in the whole world. Some areas might not even have any property borders. So we're currently running a project with the university where we take satellite images and start using machine learning and neural networks to understand how those property borders might, in which areas those property borders might be, and then we are able to extrapolate it. It's going to be 100% accuracy, probably not, but like in real life, it's going to be good enough that people see, okay, this is my property or that's the property I want.
Yeah, and I guess that's going to be a lot of work because everybody's using different geocoding systems and everything else. So, and a lot of places, especially in the third world, like in Africa, where they don't even have property, it's tribal, and I know there's some projects working on that. So that's what I'm thinking about. Just from a technological standpoint, that's a pretty huge project trying to pull all that together like that. So do you envision long-term any kind of like Second Life, kind of interactivity where people can, buy a property and then they can go and host events in that property? Is that something you guys are looking at? I mean, this is what comes to my mind with this game off the top of my head.
Absolutely, right. As I said, right now we're distributing the land, but going forward, people will be able to build on top of the land. And then people are always asking us, yeah, because We are blockchain, and we're a strong believer this whole idea of decentralization, no intermediaries, and so on. I mean, we really envision a world where people interact between themselves, where we don't really play a role, right? So to answer your question, yes, it will be some kind of second life. We don't know yet how exactly on details that is going to look like. But from philosophy is really we want people to do a decentralized transaction. So let's say you want to sell digital arts. Yeah, maybe you want to build virtual gallery or something, and somewhere in San Francisco or in Salt Lake City or so, and then you maybe add digital art pieces onto that property, and you're selling this digital arts to other players, right? So we don't want to be in the middle of that. We just want to be enabled that it somehow works. And that's what our task is. But we don't want to be in the middle and say, we define, how much fees, they have to pay and whatever. So this should be really work. The whole idea and the whole vision of Upland is to be really a parallel economy somehow, and an open economy which works on its own going forward.
So how are you guys funded? Is this a bootstrap project, or did you give VC funding?
So we're currently building on the EOS blockchain, and we are funded by EOS VC. So as you probably heard, EOS did quite a large ICO, finished it last year, and then they gave back, if I have the numbers correct, I think $1 billion or something to the whole VC community. And they distributed between different VCs around the world. And one is actually based in Frankfurt, Germany. It's called FinLab. And they funded us, the original seed funding, but we also added a couple of angels into that. As I mentioned, one good friend of mine, he's a successful entrepreneur in gaming. He invested to it. We have somebody from the real estate space who really liked the project. So we're kind of mixed the other angels into our investor group.
So you said you guys were in closed beta right now. What does your rollout timeline look like between open beta and going fully live?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, that we want to target the mass market audience. Right now, we only did let a very small amount of people in, but we have a huge demand actually of people knocking on the door who want to try in. But of course, we're closed beta, and it's called on purpose beta. Obviously, we need to find out what people like, what they don't like. We have, of course, here and there, we have some bugs we have to get out. But we're planning on going open beta somewhere around Christmas. It depends a little bit, because what we'll be launching right now, everything is based on a mobile phone browser. But we're intending on launching iOS and Android apps as soon as we have approval from the app stores. Of course, then we can launch those apps. What we're also going to introduce is a freemium model, because right now when you start playing, the only way you can play is when you purchase something, but we also want to introduce this kind of a freemium. We call it a special way, and our way is called play to own business model. That's how we try to coin this notion in the blockchain world. And you will have actually a roaming block explorer, your roaming little game piece, which helps you to discover more properties. So that's all coming in the open beta. Will be sometime around Christmas, maybe before Christmas, but maybe also early next year. It depends on actually third parties when, as I said, when we get the approval.
Dirk, I'm excited to play it myself now. So where can people find out more?
So go to www.upland.me. So so it's not .com, it's upland.me, and there's where you can sign up for the wait list. And we're letting almost everyone in at the moment. So maybe you have to wait 1 or 2, maybe 3 days. But since we're very close to open beta, we want to collect more feedback at the moment.
Very good. Dirk, thank you so much for coming on today.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to the Rob McNeely program. Make sure you check us out on the web at robmcneely.com and subscribe to our podcast at YouTube, iTunes, and on the Google Play Store.